We're more than a quarter into the NFL season, and do you know where your fantasy league stands? Well, hopefully if you started Joe Burrow on Sunday with his big 5-touchdown day on the receiving end of those, his wideout Jamar Chase with a big day as well as the two headline some of the top performers from Week 5. We're now joined by two-time fantasy analyst of the year, Jamey Eisenberg, as some key players woke up in Week 5, while others, whether it be their choosing or not an ideal outing in Week 5, and also not an ideal outing in situation for Nico Collins owners after the Texans top wideout left Sunday's game with a hamstring injury after his long touchdown. But Jamey, I want to ask you, how does this affect how you might look at the Texans offense and their playmakers now?
Well, we'll find out what they do next week because they have a very winnable game against the Patriots. So will they rush Nico Collins back knowing that they're 4-1 and clearly looking like one of the potential Super Bowl contenders, certainly a strong playoff contender, and they need that guy to be 100% in the stretch run. So the last thing you want to do is rush him back and have a re-aggravation, knowing that this Patriots offense on the other side probably isn't going to threaten the Texans to the same level like a Buffalo offense would today. So Tank Dell has to step up and play better. Certainly has produced at a much higher level. Dalton Schultz has to step up and produce at a much higher level. It puts more on Stephon Diggs, who they acquired to be one of their premier pass catchers and has done a fantastic job so far this season. So if I have C.J. Stroud, I'm still starting him next week because he still has enough weapons in the arsenal to be productive against the Patriots. And I'm just hoping, more hope, that Tank Dell starts to step up and play at a higher level.
Certainly encouraging news for those C.J. Stroud owners. But meanwhile, Jamey, if you were up early and had your morning coffee, it was the Jets who went to London town, and perhaps Aaron Rodgers was still on East Coast time as he struggled in the loss. But there wasn't any jet lag for his wideout Garrett Wilson, which you can play with plenty of puns with this one, but who finished his outing recording 13 receptions on 22 targets for 101 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, playing a little bit from behind helped his numbers, but where's your trust level in this relationship between Rodgers and Wilson?
I think this was just a great matchup for Garrett Wilson. You know, the first part of the season has been some brutal matchups for him, you know, from San Francisco to Tennessee to Denver. You know, he had to face Patrick Surtain. That's just a tough sled of games, tough schedule of games for him to have to deal with some tough cornerbacks. And so Minnesota, while their secondary is very good and while their defense is very good, they just don't have a lockdown guy that was going to take Garrett Wilson out of the game. So I thought this would be one of his better performances. But now is certainly the sell high window because we know what's potentially coming this week, and that could be a Devontae Adams trade. So if Adams comes, then Garrett Wilson's fantasy value takes a significant hit, understandably so, because just what the relationship between Rodgers and Adams have going back to their days in Green Bay. Now, if there isn't a trade, just to answer your question, I think we'll see these guys continue to perform at a higher level moving forward because this run game right now, unfortunately, has been very stagnant. They're probably going to be chasing in a lot of games based on how the defense is underperformed because they certainly don't have a pass rush right now. So I think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers continue to lean on Garrett Wilson. And anytime you're taking a receiver of his caliber and a quarterback of Rodgers' caliber, and you're talking about potentially double-digit in targets, this is why we loved Garrett Wilson coming into the season. So as long as Adams does not come to New York, we can see Garrett Wilson still have a great finish to the season starting next week against the Buffalo Bills.
Uh-oh, this could spell maybe not trouble, maybe a little bit of concern, maybe just like your antennas poke up a little bit more. Say a trade does happen and a little reunion happens between Rodgers and Adams. But you know who else woke up in Week 5, Jamey? Ravens tight end Mark Andrews, who made his first catch in 3 weeks and finishes his night catching 4 or 5 targets for 55 yards in the overtime win over those Bengals. But where's your trust level with Andrews as a starter? Could Week 5 have been a wake-up moment for him, or do you think managers should still maybe err on the side of caution?
I think you still got to err on the side of caution. I mean, we saw Isaiah Likely, catch 2 touchdowns. We saw Charlie Kolar catch a touchdown. They're using multiple tight ends, which is extremely frustrating. And this game has sort of been different from what we've seen the last 3 weeks for them, which is the run game was dominant. And while Derrick Henry had a big finish to the game, he was struggling, 14 for 40 before the big run there to set up the game-winning kick. So if they're running the ball at the level that they have been, and it wouldn't be surprised if they do that against Washington next week, then we're not going to see very many targets from Mark Andrews. So this is somewhat of a sell-high window just because his name still carries a lot of value. But if you have Mark Andrews, you should probably be still looking to acquire another tight end in some capacity. Now, I hope just based on what John Harbaugh has been saying, what Lamar Jackson has been saying, like they're waiting to get Mark Andrews going, and they need Mark Andrews to get going, I think, to make this offense take another step, to help this offense take another step, because Zay Flowers has been great. Derrick Henry has been great. Lamar Jackson still playing an MVP level. When you have Mark Andrews playing at the level that he's typically used to playing at, that just makes him that much more dangerous. So there's probably still a lot of games ahead for him to be very successful. But based on what we've seen, and how he's been used as a blocker. If you can trade him for something of significance because of his name, I would try to do so.
All right, Jamey. Well, you know we can't talk fantasy football without talking winners and losers. So I want to start things on the positive end of things. Who was your biggest winner from Sunday?
So we may have a quarterback controversy in Indianapolis because Joe Flacco comes in and the offense just looks different. While I love Anthony Richardson and I'm still expecting him to have a fantastic season, Flacco does things differently and he makes these receivers that much better. So not only is Flacco a winner by himself because he had over 300 yards passing and multiple touchdowns, he made Michael Pittman a winner. He made Josh Downs a winner. He made Alec Pierce a winner. And so the offense, again, just looks different in Indianapolis because of how he throws the ball and connects with his receiving core. So we'll see what they do going into week 6. If Richardson, they may just say, hey, listen, get that hip right. We'll maybe reevaluate things going into week 7 against the Dolphins in a much easier matchup. Facing the Titans is not going to be easy. His defense has been really good in Tennessee. So it wouldn't be surprising if Flacco starts one more game. And if he does, he's basically a number 1 quarterback just based on what he did last year in Cleveland and what he's done in a game and a half so far against Pittsburgh and the matchup today against Jacksonville.
It's not the first time I've heard of Joe Flacco coming in and seeing some production with an offense, but with the winners, Jamey, we obviously got to talk losers. And outside of my 2 fantasy leagues that's officially lost for the year, give me your biggest letdown in week 5.
Yeah, I mean, I can't sit here and not call myself out when I have a start of the week that fails. And Brock Purdy was my start of the week, and he had a disappointing game today against the Arizona Cardinals. You know, I thought he'd come in and light up this defense, and it looked like he was on his way. Solid first half. He finally got Brandon Ayuk going. But things really fell apart in the second half. A couple turnovers off tip passes, so, you know, not necessarily all of his fault. But he just did not play at the level that he's been playing at. You know, he was number 2 in passing yards coming into the game, just had some unlucky touchdown production. And this is now 4 or 5 games where he's been under 20 fantasy points. So I think fantasy managers have to look at it and say, maybe he's not the same Brock Purdy from a fantasy perspective. I still think he's going to play fantastic football the rest of the way. I think things will change for the better when Christian McCaffrey comes back, just because what he does in the passing game by comparison to Jordan Mason. But for today, he was my number 6 quarterback. He was my start of the week, and he was a disappointment. So they're not always going to be winners, unfortunately. We'll get back on track in week number 6.
Hey, and by the way, speaking of back on track, maybe not the best outing for Brock Purdy. However, we did at least get to see the emergence of Brandon Ayuk. I think a lot of fantasy owners waiting to see that for quite a bit of time. As always, we appreciate you stopping by with the insight, Jamey. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good stuff there from Jamey. And if you want more, you want to check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast, where Jamey's joined by Heath Cummings, Adam Azer, Dave Richard, with all of the latest insight to help you dominate your league. Make sure you download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.